My cruel stepfather made me homeless for Dad's bowling alley. Now he has to call me boss. I never thought I'd be homeless at 18. But here I am, sitting in the dark, surrounded by dust and memories in the bowling alley my dad left me when he died. The place where I practically grew up. The place that's now the only thing I have left. It's been 3 years since Dad had that heart attack. Just collapsed at 46 while fixing the pin setter on lane 6. Gone in an instant. Sometimes I still can't believe it happened. 1 minute he was whistling some 80s rock song. The next minute he was just gone forever. Life in small-town Greenfield, Indiana doesn't prepare you for that kind of sudden loss. My name's Matt, by the way. Not Matthew, just Matt. Dad always said Matthew was for report cards and court appearances, neither of which he wanted for me. He was right about most things, my old man. Not the best businessman, maybe, but the kind of guy who remembered everyone's name in town, who'd help neighbors move furniture without being asked, who'd let kids practice for free on slow afternoons. I've been working at Miller's supermarket since I turned 17. Nothing glamorous. Stocking shelves, bagging groceries. Occasionally helping Mrs. Peterson find the cat food. She swears they keep moving, they don't. The pay is barely above minimum wage, but I've managed to save almost $2,000 for college. Community college, at least. Indiana State, if I'm lucky. The one nice thing I had going for me was Dad's old '92 Chevy Silverado. Cherry red with a dent in the passenger door from when he backed into a fire hydrant. He swore the hydrant came out of nowhere, a story that made Mom laugh every time he told it. The truck still runs like a dream, though, mostly because Dad treated it better than most people treat their pets. Taught me everything about maintaining it, too, from oil changes to timing belts. Dad wasn't born rich, and he sure didn't die rich. But he left me something more valuable than money, Sunset Lanes. Our family's bowling alley since 1973, when Grandpa opened it. The place isn't much to look at from the outside. Faded sign, cracked parking lot, that neon palm tree that only half lights up. But inside was magic. Growing up, I spent more hours there than I did at home. Dad teaching me how to find my mark on the lane when I was 7, using a ball so heavy I needed both hands. Him showing me how to oil the lanes properly, explaining that each one had its own personality. The way he knew each trophy story on the wall. Like the one from 1986 when local legend Tommy Barnett bowled 3 perfect games in a row. History isn't in books, Matty, he'd say. It's in places where people laughed and lived and left a piece of themselves behind. But that was before Dad passed away, before Mom remarried David just 14 months later, before little Travis was born, and suddenly I became the forgotten son. I don't blame Mom entirely. Grief makes people do weird things, I guess. David seemed okay at first, a realtor with a firm handshake and polished shoes who promised to take care of everything. He moved us into his bigger house across town, and for a while, things weren't terrible, just different, cold, like living in a furniture showroom where you're afraid to put your feet up. Then the housing market crashed. David's commissions dried up. His perfectly pressed shirts got replaced with the same wrinkled polo worn 3 days straight. His nightly scotch became 2, then 3. Travis crying through the night didn't help his mood either. And suddenly, David had a brilliant idea about how to solve their money problems. Sell the money pit bowling alley that nobody goes anymore anyway. The first time he mentioned it, I laughed. I actually laughed in his face. Sunset Lanes wasn't just property. It was Dad. It was where I learned to tie my shoes, where I had my 10th birthday party, where I kissed Becky Williams during a Christmas party in 8th grade. Selling it would be like selling Dad's memory. It's just sitting there, Matt. David said over dinner last month, property taxes alone are killing us. Insurance, maintenance on that ancient building. It's bleeding us dry. Mom sat there, bouncing Travis on her knee, dark circles under her eyes. Honey, we need to be practical. Your father wasn't fiscally responsible. The place hasn't turned a profit in years. That night, I drove to Sunset Lanes and just sat in the parking lot for hours. Dad had kept it running until the day he died. Sure, it wasn't making millions, but people came. Families came. It mattered to the community. I couldn't understand why they couldn't see that. I started going there after work, cleaning up little by little, fixed the broken toilet in the men's room, swept years of dust off the floors, tested each lane, finding that 8 out of 12 still worked perfectly. I even got the ancient jukebox working again, the one that only plays vinyl records from the 70s and 80s because Dad believed music peaked with Fleetwood Mac. But David wasn't letting go. He started bringing home real estate agents who walked around Sunset Lanes like vultures, talking about location potential and development opportunities. One guy even suggested tearing it down completely for a mini-mall. I wanted to throw a bowling ball at his head. The land alone is worth $180,000, David explained one night, spreading papers across our kitchen table. We could put half toward the mortgage, use some for Travis's college fund, and still have enough to help you with your education. I stared at him. What about the actual business? The lanes? The history? David laughed. Matt, nobody goes bowling anymore. They play video games. They stream movies. Bowling is dead. I went to Mom later that night. Found her folding laundry in their bedroom. Mom, please. Dad wanted me to have Sunset Lanes. It's in his will. It's the only thing I have left of him. She looked tired, bone tired, the kind of tired that makes people give up on dreams. Sweetie, I know it means a lot to you, but we're drowning here. David's right. The practical thing is to sell. Practical? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Was it practical when Dad helped the Henderson family with free games for a year after Mr. Henderson lost his job? Was it practical when he let the high school team practice there when the school couldn't afford a coach? Mom just sighed. Maybe we can compromise. We sell, but make sure some of the money goes directly to your college fund. But I couldn't compromise on this. Not on Dad's legacy. Not on the one thing that still made me feel close to him. Things escalated quickly after that. David started taking interested parties to view the property without telling me. I found out when Mr. Wilson, who owned the hardware store, mentioned seeing strangers walking through Sunset Lanes. When I confronted David, he didn't even pretend anymore. Look, I'm trying to save this family. That property is the only asset we have that's worth anything. Either you sign off on the sale and help this family, or you can get out. I'm done supporting a grown man who cares more about a failing business than his own family's welfare. My best friend Alex said I could crash in his parents' garage if things got bad. It's not the Ritz, he joked, but at least the rats are friendly. I packed a bag that night, just in case. Turns out, I needed it sooner than I thought. I came home late from my shift at Miller's to find my stuff piled by the front door. Not even packed, just thrown in heaps. David standing there with his arms crossed. I found a buyer, he said flatly. They're making an offer tomorrow. Sign the papers or find somewhere else to live. I looked at Mom, standing behind him, Travis on her hip. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Matt, please be reasonable, she whispered. I took what I could carry, loaded into Dad's truck, and drove away from the only home I'd known for the past year. Not Alex's, though. Straight to Sunset Lanes. If I was going to be homeless, at least I'd be homeless in the one place that still felt like mine. The electricity was still on. I'd been paying the minimal bill for my paychecks. The water worked too, though it came out brown for the first minute. There was an old office couch that smelled like decades of cigarettes and lane oil. Not exactly 5-star accommodations, but somehow it felt more like home than David's house ever did. That first night was the loneliest of my life. 18 years old, high school diploma fresh in my hand, listening to the empty building creak and settle around me. I thought about what Dad would say if he could see me now. Probably something like, "Tough times don't last, tough people do." One of his favorite movie quotes he'd repeat like it was original wisdom. I couldn't sleep, so I started going through the old filing cabinets in Dad's office. Tax records, equipment manuals, league score sheets going back to the 70s. And then, buried in the bottom drawer, I found his notebook, leather-bound, worn at the edges. Inside, page after page of Dad's messy handwriting. Ideas for renovating Sunset Lanes, sketches for new layouts, marketing plans he never got to implement. Phase 1, Retro Cafe and Vinyl Corner. One page read, "Bring back the glory days. Kids today want authentic experiences. Give them the real 80s, not the fake version they see on Netflix." Another page had detailed financial projections, showing how the business could become profitable again with the right investments. Dad had it all planned out. He just ran out of time. By morning, I'd read every word. Twice, the sun was coming up, shining through the dusty windows of Sunset Lanes, illuminating dust particles dancing in the air. For the first time since Dad died, I felt something like hope. I grabbed the notebook and walked through the empty bowling alley. In the early morning light, I could see past the decay to what this place once was, and what it could be again. Dad saw it too. That's what the notebook proved. There's this quote Dad had pinned above his desk that I always thought was cheesy. "We don't inherit the earth from our ancestors. We borrow it from our children." Sitting there surrounded by dust and memories and possibility, I finally understood what he meant. Sunset Lanes wasn't just Dad's legacy to me. It was something I was supposed to build and pass on too. I had no money, no experience running a business, no support from my family, just a beat-up truck, $2,000 in savings meant for college, and a notebook full of dreams that weren't even mine. But they would be. I pulled out my phone and Googled how to revive a failing bowling alley. Game on. My college fund was disappearing fast. After buying basic cleaning supplies and paying the first month's utility bills for Sunset Lanes, those hard-earned savings were dwindling rapidly. Money I'd carefully set aside dollar by dollar from countless hours of stocking shelves and bagging groceries, now shrinking to a balance that wouldn't even cover a single semester at community college. So much for higher education, at least for now. I spent that first week just sleeping at the bowling alley and trying to wrap my head around what I was actually doing. The place was bigger than I remembered. 12 lanes, a small bar area, the rental counter, an outdated arcade section with games from when Kurt Cobain was still alive, and enough dust to make an allergist's nightmare. During the day, it didn't seem so bad. At night, though, every creak and groan of the old building had me jumping like I was in some budget horror movie, sleeping on that cigarette-stained couch in Dad's office. I kept having this recurring dream where I'd walk out to the lanes and see him there, adjusting the pin setter like that final day. I'd try to warn him, but no sound would come out. Not exactly rocket science to figure out that one, right? Guilt's a weird thing. It finds you even when you've done nothing wrong. With no real plan beyond save Dad's bowling alley, I figured I should probably learn something about running a business. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was skipping college to try something that people actually go to college to learn how to do. The Greenfield Public Library became my personal business school, not just for their books, but because they had reliable Wi-Fi and computers I could use for free. Mrs. Winters, the head librarian who'd known me since I used to attend Storytime in dinosaur pajamas, helped me get set up with a library card and computer access. "I always thought you'd be using our resources for a school project, not to save a local landmark," she said, as I logged into one of their desktop computers. Every day, I'd camp out at the same corner desk, researching small business management, watching YouTube tutorials on accounting basics, and scouring forums where bowling alley owners shared advice. The bowling alley had no internet connection yet, another expense I couldn't afford. So these library sessions were my lifeline to the information I desperately needed. All this online research was helpful, but overwhelming. Balance sheets, profit and loss statements, cash flow projections. It was like learning Mandarin while blindfolded. But I kept at it, filling a notebook with terms I needed to Google later, watching video tutorials during slow shifts at the supermarket. Dad always said, "Knowledge doesn't have to be perfect to be useful. Just start somewhere and keep building." So that's exactly what I was doing, building my knowledge one Google search at a time. While researching, I stumbled upon something even more valuable. The library had a local history section with archives of the Greenfield Daily reporter going back decades. I found articles about Sunset Lane's grand opening in 1973, complete with a ribbon-cutting photo featuring my grandfather in spectacular 70s sideburns, standing proudly in front of a brand-new building. There were photos of tournaments from the bowling alley's heyday, teams with names like the Gutter Guys and Pin Pals holding trophies, Women with big hair and men with bigger mustaches celebrating perfect games. In one photo from 1986, I even spotted a teenage version of my dad, skinny as a rail but with the same crooked smile I saw in the mirror. These weren't just old pictures. They were proof that Sunset Lanes mattered, that it was once the beating heart of Greenfield's social scene. Armed with newfound determination, I drove to City Hall to learn what permits I'd need to reopen. The clerk's expression when I told her my plans was a perfect blend of pity and amusement. The look you give a child who says they want to be an astronaut cowboy when they grow up. You'll need business licenses, health department approval, fire safety inspection, building code compliance verification, insurance. Her list went on and on while my hopes sank lower and lower. Each item meant money I didn't have and knowledge I didn't possess. On my way out, feeling thoroughly defeated, I literally bumped into Mr. Jenkins, my high school economics teacher. He was there arguing about a parking ticket, but immediately forgot all about it when he saw my face. "Matt, I heard what happened with your stepdad. Tough break." Mr. Jenkins was one of those teachers who actually cared about his students as people, not just test scores. "What brings you to the temple of bureaucracy?" Over coffee at the diner across the street, I spilled everything. About Dad's notebook, my half-baked plan to revive Sunset Lanes, and the mountain of permits and expenses I hadn't anticipated. Instead of telling me I was crazy, Mr. Jenkins pulled out a pen and started jotting notes on a napkin. "First thing, you need to separate emotion from business. Yes, this place was your dad's legacy, but sentimentality won't pay the bills." He sketched out a rough business plan framework, explaining each component in that same patient tone he used to teach us about supply and demand curves. Start small. You don't need to reopen all 12 lanes at once. Begin with a few, maybe add a small cafe component. Create an experience, not just a place to bowl. Mr. Jenkins offered to help me put together a proper business plan and navigate the permit maze. "Consider it my contribution to preserving a piece of Greenfield history," he said. "Plus, I miss those jalapeno poppers your dad used to serve at the snack bar." For the first time since this crazy idea took hold, I felt like I might not be completely delusional. I had knowledge, resources, a semi-advisor, and determination. What I didn't have was money or enough hours in the day. The supermarket wouldn't give me more hours, and even if they did, minimum wage wasn't going to fund a business renovation. I needed a second job, preferably somewhere that paid better tips than Miller's "Thank you. Have a nice day" policy. Route 40 Bar and Grill was the kind of place that managed to be simultaneously a family restaurant, a sports bar, and on weekends, the closest thing Greenfield had to a nightclub. They had decent food, better beer, and most importantly, a help wanted sign in the window. The manager, Jerry, was a no-nonsense guy with forearms like Popeye and a voice permanently roughened by years of smoking. Ever waited tables before? No, but I'm a quick learner, and I need the money more than anyone else who will apply. He sized me up for a moment. "You're Bill Thompson's kid, aren't you? From the bowling alley?" When I nodded, his expression softened just slightly. "Your old man gave me my first job when I was your age. Never forgot it." He handed me an apron. "Training starts tomorrow. Don't be late, don't be hungover, and don't hit on the other servers." Just like that, I became the newest waiter at Route 40. The learning curve was steep. Balancing trays, remembering orders, dealing with customers who seemed personally offended by the lack of ranch dressing on their table. But the tips were decent, especially when I worked the weekend dinner shifts. My schedule became brutal. Supermarket in the mornings, Route 40 evenings and weekends, and every spare moment at Sunset Lanes cleaning, planning, or falling asleep while reading business books. Nights at the bowling alley were the hardest. The place was too big, too empty, too full of echoes and memories. Dad used to say that buildings absorb the emotions of the people inside them. If that was true, then Sunset Lanes had decades of joy, disappointment, celebration, and loss baked into its walls. Sometimes I swore I could hear phantom pins falling or ghostly laughter when I was alone late at night. During those sleepless hours, Dad's words would come back to me. "What matters isn't what you have, but what you leave behind." He'd said it during one of our Sunday morning maintenance sessions when I complained about how much work the place required. At the time, I thought it was just another one of his fortune cookie wisdoms. Now it was becoming my mantra, the thing I repeated when doubt crept in. One night at Route 40, I was clearing tables when I overheard a group of older guys talking about the good old days in Greenfield. "Remember those midnight tournaments at Sunset Lanes?" said one, a gray-haired man with a Vietnam veteran cap. "Winner got a case of beer and bragging rights for a month. My Mary and I had our first date there." Another added, "February 14th, 1979. I was so nervous I dropped the ball on my foot. Still married 44 years later, bad bowling and all. They noticed me listening and called me over. 'You're Bill Thompson's boy, aren't you?' Spitting image of him at your age." For the next hour, I listened to their stories about sunset lanes, championship games, first dates, birthday parties, a marriage proposal on Lane 7 during a Thanksgiving tournament in 1975, the time the power went out during the blizzard of '82, and everyone stayed overnight, sleeping in the booths and playing cards by candlelight. These weren't just nostalgic ramblings of old men. They were pieces of Greenfield's living history. And Sunset Lanes wasn't just my father's legacy. It was woven into the community's story in ways I'd never fully appreciated. That night's tips were less than stellar because I spent too much time talking instead of serving, but I walked away with something more valuable, a vision of what Sunset Lanes could be again. The next evening at Route 40 was unusually busy. A tour bus had broken down nearby, and suddenly we had 30 stranded travelers all ordering at once. I was running between tables when I collided with Emma, one of the bartenders I hadn't worked with before. My tray of drinks splashed all over her black shirt, soaking her completely. I expected anger, maybe tears. Instead, she looked down at her drenched self and started laughing. "Well, that's one way to cool off on a hot night," she said, wringing out her shirt bottom. "I'm Emma, by the way, the walking cocktail sponge." Emma wasn't like the other servers and bartenders who treated Route 40 as a paycheck between better opportunities. She had this infectious energy and genuine interest in people that made everyone around her feel like old friends. She was working her way through college, studying interior design at Ball State, while bartending nights. During our shared shifts, we'd talk during brief moments between orders. She was curious about everything. My life, my plans for Sunset Lanes, my dreams beyond Greenfield. No one had asked me about those things in a long time. My grandfather proposed to my grandma at that bowling alley, she told me one night while we were restocking the bar. Thanksgiving tournament 1975. Got down on one knee right after bowling a turkey. She said it was the luckiest strike of his life. I remember that story from the old-timers. Lane 7, right? He had the ring hidden in his bowling bag. Emma's eyes widened. "How did you know that?" Some of the regulars were talking about it. Apparently, it was quite the spectacle. "It's family legend in our house," she said, smiling. "Gramps says he was so nervous, he almost dropped the ring between the floorboards. They were married for 43 years before he passed." Something clicked in that moment. Sunset Lanes wasn't just my connection to my father. It was Emma's connection to her grandfather. And who knew how many other Greenfield families had their own bowling alley stories? That weekend, I gave Emma a tour of Sunset Lanes. She walked through the dusty building with genuine interest, not the pity most people showed when they saw the state of the place. "This has so much potential," she said, running her hand along the vintage bar return. "You could really play up the retro vibe, make it a destination, not just a bowling alley." As an interior design student, she saw possibilities where I just saw problems. She talked about color schemes and lighting that would honor the 70s to 80s aesthetic while making it feel fresh, about creating Instagram-worthy corners that would attract younger customers while preserving what made the place special. "People my age are obsessed with authenticity and nostalgia for eras we never experienced," she explained. "This place is a gold mine of genuine vintage cool." Emma's enthusiasm was contagious. That night, I created an Instagram account for Sunset Lanes with the hashtag #SaveSunsetLanes. I posted some of the old newspaper photos I'd found, alongside current pictures of my cleaning and repair efforts. Nothing fancy, just honest documentation of trying to save something that mattered. To my surprise, people started following. First, just a few local folks, then friends of friends, then strangers who appreciated restoration projects or Americana nostalgia. They weren't huge numbers, but each new follower and supporter comment felt like a tiny vote of confidence. Emma became a regular at Sunset Lanes after our Route 40 shifts. She'd bring coffee and help me clean or brainstorm ideas for the space. Her design education provided the vocabulary and concepts for what I've been trying to articulate: how to honor the past while creating something viable for present. We spent one entire night just cleaning and restoring the trophy case. Each dusty award had a story: league championships, perfect games, youth tournament winners going back to the 70s. We arranged them chronologically, creating a timeline of Greenfield's bowling history. "This should be the centerpiece," Emma said, "not hidden in the corner. It's what makes this place different from some generic modern bowling alley." Working with Emma made the overwhelming task seem possible. The empty building didn't feel quite so lonely or intimidating with her energy filling the space. And for the first time since I'd moved into Sunset Lanes, I found myself looking forward to the evenings instead of dreading the quiet. Reality crashed back one morning when I met with a fire inspector. Mr. Harding was a by-the-book official who had no interest in nostalgia or community landmarks. He walked through the building making notes on his clipboard, each scribble sounding like another nail in my dream's coffin. Sprinkler system needs complete recertification. Emergency lighting outdated. Electrical panel doesn't meet current code. Exit signs need replacement. His list went on and on. When he finally handed me the estimate for bringing everything up to code, I nearly collapsed. The number had more zeros than my bank account could handle in this lifetime, let alone before I hoped to open. "Look, son," he said, softening slightly, "I knew your dad. Good man. But rules are rules, and these are safety issues. Can't let people in here until they're fixed." That night, I sat in the darkened bowling alley, staring at the inspection report. The task had seemed ambitious, but possible before. Now it felt like trying to climb Everest in flip-flops. When Emma arrived after her shift, she found me surrounded by crumpled papers and empty coffee cups, looking like I hadn't slept in days. Which, honestly, I hadn't. "That bad, huh?" she asked, sitting beside me. I showed her the inspector's report and the cost estimates. "I've got about $800 left, Emma. This requires closer to $50,000. Game over." Instead of offering empty encouragement, she studied the papers carefully. "My mom works at First Indiana Bank," she said finally. "She helps with small business loans. Maybe she could—" I was already shaking my head. No bank is going to give a loan to an unemployed 18-year-old with no collateral and no business experience. Emma's expression turned determined. "Maybe not, but they might give one to an unemployed 18-year-old with a solid business plan, community support, and a personal connection to the loan officer." I looked at her, this girl I'd known for barely 2 weeks, who already believed in my impossible dream more than my own family did. "What do we have to lose?" she asked. What indeed? Emma's mom, Mrs. Linda Parker, wasn't what I expected. Working at First Indiana Bank for 20 years had given her a practiced smile and the ability to say "unfortunately" in a way that somehow made bad news sound inevitable rather than disappointing. We sat across from her desk, me in my only button-up shirt with a coffee stain I'd try to hide with a tie, and Emma nervously bouncing her leg beside me. Unfortunately, there was... Banks don't typically approve business loans for applicants with no credit history, no collateral, and limited income. She closed my hastily assembled loan application folder, especially not for a business model as risky as a bowling alley in 2025. I prepared for rejection, but hearing it officially still felt like a punch to the gut. Emma, however, wasn't giving up. "Mom, you always talk about how banks should support local businesses, how community matters. This isn't just any business. It's Sunset Lanes, where Grandpa proposed to Grandma, where you had your sweet 16. Mrs. Parker's professional facade softened slightly. "Emma, honey, I understand the sentimental value, but the bank doesn't make decisions based on nostalgia. What if you co-signed, just for a small loan to get the necessary permits and safety upgrades? I sat there awkwardly as mother and daughter had what appeared to be an entire conversation through meaningful looks and subtle facial expressions, the kind of silent communication only family members perfect over decades. Finally, Mrs. Parker sighed. I can't approve a traditional business loan, but I might be able to help with a personal loan with my guarantee. Much smaller than you're asking for, enough for critical safety upgrades only, and with very strict repayment terms. It wasn't a full amount I needed, but it was something, a financial lifeline when every other door had closed in my face. By the following week, I had $15,000 deposited in my newly opened business account. My first legitimate step toward becoming an actual business owner rather than just a kid with a crazy dream. I immediately paid for fire safety upgrades and submitted paperwork for the permits I'd need to eventually open. I thought getting the money would solve my biggest problems. Turns out, it just gave me access to a whole new set of challenges. The city zoning board questioned whether the building's existing commercial designation was still valid after being vacant for so long. The water department discovered corroded pipes that needed replacing. The electrical inspector found outdated wiring that wouldn't support modern equipment. Every day brought a new obstacle, usually with another four-figure price tag attached. The loan money evaporated faster than morning dew in July. Meanwhile, I was still working both jobs, stocking shelves at Miller's in the mornings and waiting tables at Route 40 evenings and weekends. My schedule was brutal. Up at 5 a.m. for the supermarket, then to the bowling alley to meet contractors or inspectors during any break, then to Route 40 until midnight, followed by a few hours working on the bowling alley before collapsing on the office couch for a few hours of sleep. Rinse and repeat. Some days I was so tired I'd find myself standing in the cereal aisle at Miller's with no memory of how I got there or what I was supposed to be doing. You're going to crash and burn if you keep this up, Emma told me one night at Route 40 after I nearly fell asleep while taking an order. The customer had to repeat "no onions" 3 times before it registered. I'm fine, I insisted. The universal lie of the not fine. When was the last time you had a full night's sleep? Or ate something that wasn't from the Route 40 kitchen, or a vending machine? I couldn't remember, which probably proved her point. The next day, Emma showed up at Sunset Lanes with groceries, a new pillow for the office couch, and strict instructions that I was to take the entire evening off. No work, no renovations, no planning. Just a home-cooked meal and 8 consecutive hours of sleep. The bowling alley will still be here tomorrow, she said, pushing me toward the couch after dinner. You're no good to this place if you work yourself into the hospital. She was right, of course. That night was the first time in weeks I slept without dreaming about building codes or bank loans. It wasn't a solution to my mounting problems, but it was a much-needed reset. Emma's support went beyond just making sure I occasionally functioned as a human being. One day she showed up with a decent camera and tripod. You should start documenting this journey, she suggested. People love restoration projects. It might bring more attention to what you're doing here. The idea of putting myself on camera seemed ridiculous at first. I was just a small-town kid trying to save his dad's bowling alley, not some influencer with perfect teeth and practiced charisma. But Emma was persuasive, and social media attention could only help with community awareness. So I started a YouTube channel called Saving Sunset Lanes. Nothing fancy, just honest videos about the restoration process, the challenges, the small victories. I talked about Dad sometimes, about what the place meant to the community. I showed the broken things and the fixed things, explained what I was learning about business along the way. The first video got 43 views, mostly Emma, her mom, and apparently a few regulars from Route 40 who took pity on me. The second video hit around 60. Not exactly viral sensation territory, but I kept at it, uploading new content whenever I had time between everything else. Slowly, a small community started to form around the channel. Comments from locals sharing memories of the bowling alley. Practical advice from retired contractors. Encouragement from strangers who appreciated the preservation effort. Then something unexpected happened. A travel and lifestyle blogger named Ryan Martinez, who had grown up in Greenfield before moving to Indianapolis and amassing over 100,000 followers, happened to see one of my videos shared in a Remember Greenfield Facebook group. He made a video about his own memories of sunset lanes, talked about the importance of preserving small-town landmarks, and linked to my channel. Overnight, my subscriber count jumped from around 200 to nearly 3,000. My most recent video went from 70 views to over 15,000. Suddenly, people were paying attention. My Instagram followers quadrupled. Local news outlets reached out for interviews. And most importantly, people started showing up at Sunset Lanes offering to help. Mr. Peterson, a retired mechanic who'd maintained the pin setters for 20 years before Dad took over, came by to look at the lanes. These old Brunswick A2 machines are built like tanks, he said, examining the mechanisms with expert hands. Just need some TLC and proper calibration. I can help get them running again, no charge. Mrs. Wilkinson, whose late husband had been the manager before my grandfather bought the place, brought in boxes of memorabilia, old league photos, vintage bowling shirts, tournament trophies that had been mistakenly taken home decades ago. These belong here, she insisted, part of the alley's history. A teenager named Zach, who'd been following my YouTube channel from the beginning, started showing up after school to help with cleaning and painting. My grandpa talks about this place all the time, he explained. Says it was a coolest spot in town back in the day. Figured I could help make it cool again. The most surprising offer came from Mr. Thompson, a local carpenter known for his high-end custom furniture. He stopped by one afternoon, surveyed the worn wooden benches and scoring tables, and simply stated, "I'll restore all the woodwork. No charge up front. Just put my business cards by the counter. When you open..." Other local business owners followed suit, offering services or materials in exchange for future promotion. The print shop will provide menus and flyers for discounted rates. The hardware store extended a line of credit for supplies. Even Jerry from Route 40 offered to help develop a simple food menu when we were ready for that phase. This outpouring of community support wasn't just saving me money, it was validating everything I believed about Sunset Lanes. This wasn't just my father's legacy. It was something that mattered to the entire town. People wanted this place to succeed almost as much as I did. With volunteer help and bartered services, progress accelerated dramatically. The interior was transforming from a dusty, abandoned relic to a place with potential. Emma's design vision guided the aesthetic, preserving the genuine vintage elements while updating just enough to make it appealing to modern customers. But then came the fire inspector's follow-up visit. Despite all our progress, he found issues with the newly installed sprinkler system. The company that installed it had cut corners, using substandard materials that wouldn't pass certification. The fix would cost another $8,000 that I absolutely didn't have. I was devastated. After all the progress, after all the community support, to be stopped by something so bureaucratic and expensive seemed cruelly unfair. I couldn't ask Mrs. Parker for more money. The bank loan was already stretching her professional goodwill to the breaking point. Emma, ever resourceful, suggested a social media fundraiser. People are invested in this project now. They want to see it succeed. Let them help. We created a GoFundMe page explaining the situation and shared it across all Sunset Lane social channels. Within 48 hours, the campaign had raised over $6,000, most in small donations from local families, former lead bowlers, and YouTube subscribers who become emotionally invested in the restoration journey. The remaining $2,000 came as an anonymous donation that I strongly suspected was from Mrs. Parker, though she never admitted it. With the sprinkler system properly fixed and certified, we finally received conditional approval to open, pending final inspections of completed work. I set a target date about 3 weeks out, planning a soft opening with just a cafe portion, and maybe 2 lanes operational as a preview. Everyone was pulling together to make it happen. Even my mother called after seeing a local news segment about the community effort, awkwardly offering congratulations and asking if Travis could come to the opening. Progress was imperfect but undeniable. For the first time, opening Sunset Lane seemed not just possible but inevitable. That's when David reappeared in my life. I was overseeing electrical work in the main hall when his BMW pulled into the parking lot. Through the windows, I watched him survey the exterior improvements with a calculating expression before heading to the entrance. "Quite the operation you got going here," he said, looking around the transformed interior. He was thinner than I remembered, his designer clothes slightly looser, his smile noticeably forced. The local hero, saving a community landmark. Very inspirational. I said nothing, just waited for whatever was coming next. David never made social calls. "Look, I may have been hasty before," he continued, pacing around like he was assessing a property for sale. "Family tensions, financial pressures. You know how it is. But seeing what you've accomplished here, well, it's impressive. Shows real entrepreneurial spirit." "Thanks," I replied flatly. "Was there something specific you wanted?" His smile tightened. "I've been thinking, this is still technically a family business, right? Your father's legacy. And as your stepfather, I'm family." There it was. I should have known this wasn't a reconciliation attempt. "I'm proposing a partnership," David continued smoothly. "I have business experience, connections with local officials that could smooth out any remaining permit issues. Plus, having an adult co-owner will make future financing much easier. And in return for all these benefits, you want a modest share of the business, say 40%, for helping you navigate the adult business world." I almost laughed out loud. "You kicked me out of the house when I wouldn't sell this place. Now you want to own nearly half of it without investing a penny." David's friendly facade evaporated. "You're still just a kid playing businessman. Do you have any idea how many regulations a commercial establishment has to comply with? How easily the tax authorities can find discrepancies in a new business? How unfortunate accidents can delay openings indefinitely?" The threat was hardly subtle. David had connections at City Hall from his years in real estate. He could potentially cause problems with inspections, permits, tax assessments, bureaucratic nightmares that could sink Sunset Lanes before it even opened. I felt a cold anger I'd never experienced before. Not the hot, reactive anger of being thrown out of my home, but something calculated and clear. "That sounds suspiciously like extortion, David," I said calmly, pulling out my phone and tapping the screen, "which is why I started recording this conversation the moment you walked in." His eyes widened slightly. "I don't think the police or the local news that's been covering this community restoration project would look kindly on a grown man threatening his stepson's business. Do you?" David took a step back, reassessing the situation. "You're misinterpreting my concerns. I was simply offering business advice." "Great advice. I'll be sure to share how helpful you've been." I opened Instagram on my phone, quickly typing a post while maintaining eye contact. "In fact, I should publicly thank you right now." I showed in the draft post. "Special thanks to my stepfather, David Miller, for pushing me out of my comfort zone and inspiring this journey to restore Sunset Lanes. His actions motivated me to fight for this community landmark." Sometimes the people who challenge us the most end up being the reason for our greatest accomplishments. "What are you doing?" he demanded, letting everyone know how your tough love approach helped make this community project possible. "I'll also mention how you just stopped by to check on progress. The whole town is following this restoration. You know, they'd love to hear about your visit." The message was clear. The community was watching. The narrative was established. If anything happened to delay the opening, mysterious permit problems, unexpected inspections, unfortunate accidents, everyone would know exactly who to blame. David's jaw tightened. "You've changed. Had to grow up fast. Thanks for that life lesson, too." He left without another word, his BMW peeling out of the parking lot like he couldn't get away fast enough. The confrontation left me shaken but oddly empowered. I'd stood my ground, protected what I was building. Dad would have been proud, not of the veiled threats or manipulative social media tactics, perhaps, but of the determination to defend what mattered. With David's threats neutralized, I refocused on the upcoming opening. We were so close. The cafe area was nearly finished. 2 lanes were operational thanks to Mr. Peterson's mechanical expertise. The vintage jukebox worked perfectly again, Emma's design vision had created a space that somehow felt both authentically retro and freshly relevant. Just 1 week before our planned soft opening, disaster struck again. The ancient ball return system on our operational lanes catastrophically failed during testing. A critical gear assembly had worn down beyond repair, and replacement parts for the specific 1970s Brunswick model were no longer manufactured. We could retrofit with modern components, but that would cost thousands we didn't have and ruin the authentic vintage experience that was becoming our unique selling point. We could try to find salvage parts from other closed bowling alleys, but that would take time we didn't have with the opening date looming. After all the obstacles we'd overcome, financial, bureaucratic, personal, to be stopped by an irreplaceable gear seemed like cosmic humor at its cruelest. That night, sitting amidst the tools and spare parts that couldn't solve our problem, I made one of the hardest decisions of my restoration journey. We would still open on the scheduled date, but without operational bowling lanes. Sunset Lane's Cafe and Vinyl Corner would debut as planned, offering the food, music, and atmosphere we created. The actual bowling would have to wait until we could properly restore the lanes without compromising their vintage integrity. It wasn't the grand opening I'd envisioned, but as Dad used to say, sometimes you have to adjust your aim without changing your target. We'd get there eventually, one step at a time. Grand opening day for Sunset Lane's Cafe and Vinyl Corner arrived with more anxiety than excitement. Without functioning bowling lanes, we were essentially just another retro cafe in a town that already had plenty of eating options. I'd spent the night before questioning every decision that had led to this moment, wondering if I completely lost my mind trying to honor Dad's legacy. But when we opened the doors at 11 a.m., there was already a line waiting, not just curious locals, but people from neighboring towns who'd followed our restoration journey online. They came for the nostalgia, for the story, for the connection to something authentic in an increasingly artificial world. The interior looked incredible. Emma's design vision had transformed the space while preserving its soul. The original wood paneling had been restored to a warm honey glow. Vintage bowling memorabilia and local tournament photos lined the walls. The rehabilitated jukebox played vinyl records from the 70s and 80s, with selections Dad had collected over decades. In the cafe area, we served simple food with nostalgic names: the Perfect Game Burger, Kingpin Chicken Sandwich, and 7-frame fries. The menu was limited by necessity. Our kitchen consisted of little more than a commercial grill, a fryer, and a vintage milkshake machine I'd found on Craigslist. The first day, we sold out of everything by 6 p.m. I collapsed into a booth after closing, simultaneously exhausted and elated. Maybe this crazy plan wasn't so crazy after all. Reality set in during the following weeks. After the novelty wore off, customer numbers dropped dramatically. Turns out, people expected to actually bowl at a bowling alley, even one that was still under renovation. Without that draw, we were just another diner with good burgers but limited appeal. The financial reality was harsh. Our operating costs were higher than projected. Everything from food supplies to utilities exceeded my inexperienced estimates. Revenue wasn't keeping pace, and I was burning through our limited capital at an alarming rate. I had to make painful cuts. We reduced operating hours, closing on Mondays and Tuesdays completely. I let go of the part-time cook I'd hired, taking over kitchen duties myself. My daily schedule became even more grueling. Prep cook in the morning, waiter during service, cleanup crew at night, and renovation worker during any spare moment. Emma noticed the toll it was taking before I did. One night after closing, as I was tallying the day's disappointing receipts, she silently placed a cup of coffee and a sandwich beside me. "You haven't eaten since breakfast," she said, "and you can't run this place if you collapse from exhaustion." Her small gestures of care had become a constant during those difficult weeks. While others might have walked away from the stress and uncertainty, Emma leaned in. She'd stay late helping with cleanup, bring homemade food when she knew I'd forget to eat, and somehow always find ways to make me laugh even on the worst days. "You know," she said one evening as we were closing up, "my design professors always said that the most beautiful spaces are the ones with visible history, where you can see the layers of life that have happened there." She looked around at the vintage bowling alley, at all our work. I think that's true for people too. In those struggling early weeks, Emma and I grew closer than I ever expected. What had started as a workplace friendship deepened into something I couldn't ignore. I found myself thinking about her when she wasn't around, looking forward to seeing her smile, valuing her opinion above anyone else's. The business might have been struggling, but personally, I never felt more supported or understood. One night, as we sat exhausted on the newly refinished lanes after another disappointing day of low sales, Emma looked at me with unexpected seriousness. "This place will work, Matt. Maybe not exactly how you planned. Maybe not on your timeline, but it will work. Because you believe in it, and now I do too." I realized then that somewhere along this crazy journey, I'd fallen in love with her. That whatever happened with Sunset Lanes, meeting Emma had already made every struggle worthwhile. Then fate intervened in the most unexpected way. A woman in a crisp pantsuit walked in 10 minutes after closing time. I was about to explain we were closed when she introduced herself as Meredith Coleman, location scout for Fairfield Productions. They were filming a period piece set in 1980s small-town America and had been struggling to find authentic-looking locations. "Someone on our team saw your Instagram account," she explained, taking photos of the interior with her phone. "This place is perfect. Genuinely vintage without looking like a theme park version of the 80s. Exactly what our director has been searching for." Emma squeezed my hand excitedly as we listened to the unexpected proposal. 2 weeks later, Sunset Lanes was transformed into a movie set. They needed the space for 6 days of shooting. Pay me more for that week than the cafe had earned in the previous month. Even better, they needed to use 2 bowling lanes for certain scenes, so they paid to expedite the repairs I couldn't afford. Emma and I were like excited kids during the filming, sneaking peeks at the production whenever possible. The crew even let her contribute some design ideas for a few scenes, noting her natural talent for period-accurate details. Watching her confidently discuss visual aesthetics with professional set designers, I felt a surge of pride that only deepened my feelings for her. The movie wasn't a blockbuster, some coming-of-age story set in 1986, but starred 2 recognizable actors and had a decent budget. Local news covered production extensively, putting Sunset Lanes on the map in a way my limited marketing never could have. When we reopened after filming wrapped, customer traffic doubled overnight. People came hoping to glimpse celebrities long gone, but stayed for the atmosphere and food. Soon we had lines on weekends and a steady stream of customers on weekdays. Just as things were looking up, a new challenge emerged. Starlight Entertainment Center opened on the other side of town, a gleaming, modern bowling facility with automatic scoring, cosmic bowling nights, and a full-service sports bar. Their grand opening promotion offered half-price games for a month, drawing crowds from across the county. My first instinct was panic. How could Sunset Lanes compete with state-of-the-art facilities when we were still struggling to restore basic functionality? But then I remembered something Dad used to say: "Don't try to be better at what they do best. Be the best at what only you can do." Instead of competing on modernity, we doubled down on what made Sunset Lane special: authenticity and community connection. We launched Decades Nights, featuring music, fashion, and food from different eras. We organized storytelling evenings where longtime residents shared memories of the bowling alley's heyday. We displayed historical photos and memorabilia contributed by community members, creating a living museum of Greenfield's social history. While Starlight attracted birthday parties and corporate events, we became the gathering place for people seeking connection to local traditions. Both businesses thrived by serving different needs in the community. My YouTube channel continued to document the journey, growing beyond local interest to attract retro enthusiasts and small business supporters nationwide. As subscriber count passed 50,000, I started receiving speaking invitations from business groups and restoration societies, sharing what I'd learned about preserving community landmarks while making them economically viable. 8 months after opening the cafe, we finally launched the first 2 fully restored bowling lanes. Unlike modern centers with digital interfaces and automated systems, we preserved the mechanical scoring and original ball returns, offering a bowling experience that had largely disappeared from America. Customers actually paid more for this authentic experience than they would at Starlight's high-tech lanes. The grand reopening of the bowling section was covered by regional news. I stood proudly behind the counter, watching people of all ages experiencing bowling the way it used to be, with pencil scoring, shared shoes, and the distinctive mechanical sound of pins being reset. In the midst of the celebration, I almost didn't notice her at first, Mom, standing near the entrance, holding Travis's hand. She looked thinner, more tired than when I'd last seen her, but her smile was genuine. We hadn't spoken in months, not since our awkward phone call after the local news coverage. Now she was here, watching as people celebrated what I'd built from the ruins of Dad's failed business. "This place looks amazing, Matt," she said, approaching the counter. "Your father would be so proud." Travis, now almost 3, stared up at me with curious eyes, probably wondering who the stranger was supposed to be in his life. Mom explained that she'd left David 2 months ago, taking only Travis and some personal belongings. His controlling behavior had worsened after his confrontation with me, his financial desperation making him increasingly erratic. "I should have stood up to him sooner," she admitted. "Should have supported you instead of him. I was just so tired and scared of starting over again." Part of me wanted to hold on to the anger, to make her feel the abandonment I'd experienced. But looking at her, clearly struggling but making an effort to reconnect, I recognized that holding grudges wouldn't honor Dad's memory. "Are you staying somewhere safe?" I asked. She nodded. "Small apartment across town. I got a job at the supermarket, but it barely covers rent." I could have offered financial help, but that wouldn't solve the underlying problem. Instead, I suggested something better for both of us. "We need an office manager here. Someone to handle scheduling, bookkeeping, customer service. Hours are flexible, and you could bring Travis during shifts. There's even an office couch for naps. I can personally vouch for its comfort." Her eyes welled up with tears, understanding this wasn't just employment, but a chance to rebuild our relationship on new terms. She started the following Monday. As we closed up that night, an elderly man in a worn bowling league jacket approached me. I recognized him as Frank Harrison, a local bowling legend who'd been friends with my grandfather. "Got something you might be interested in, son," he said. "My buddy owned Riverdale Lanes over in Ohio. Place closed last month. His family's selling everything, including a complete collection of vintage Brunswick equipment from the 60s. Original parts that would fit these old lanes perfectly." My interest was immediately piqued. Sounds amazing, but probably out of my price range right now. Harrison smiled knowingly. Maybe not. Let me tell you why this collection is worth every penny. 2 years can change everything. After Mr. Harrison showed me that vintage Brunswick equipment collection, I spent weeks trying to figure out how to afford it, calculating, recalculating, and ultimately accepting that it was beyond my reach. Then Robert Collins walked into Sunset Lanes. He'd grown up in Greenfield before building a successful commercial real estate company in Indianapolis. His first date with his wife had been at our bowling alley in 1978, and he'd seen our story on PBS after a local documentary about the restoration went viral regionally. "This place matters," he told me, looking around with a misty-eyed nostalgia that only childhood memories can evoke. "It's part of what made Greenfield special." Collins became our angel investor, providing capital to acquire Harrison's vintage collection and restore all 12 lanes to their original glory. He understood what we were building wasn't just a business, but a bridge between generations. With proper funding, Sunset Lanes transformed into something truly special. Authentic 70s to 80s equipment lovingly restored and subtly modernized for safety and reliability. We became known as the place where bowling's golden age lived on, attracting enthusiasts from neighboring states who drive hours for the experience. Our YouTube channel hit 100,000 subscribers. The PBS documentary won a regional Emmy. Suddenly, I was being invited to speak at business conferences about experience-based entrepreneurship and heritage preservation as a business model, phrases I couldn't have defined 2 years earlier. Collins, seeing our success, proposed expansion. He envisioned a network of restored vintage bowling alleys across Indiana, each preserving the unique character of its community while sharing our proven business model. The offer was tempting. The money would be substantial, but something about it didn't feel right. Dad never wanted an empire. I explained to Emma one night as we discussed the proposal. He just wanted a place that mattered to people, that preserved something worth keeping. Emma, now running her own thriving design studio specializing in authentic retro interiors, understood completely. Some businesses should grow, others should deepen. So instead of expansion, we focused on putting down stronger roots. I bought a small craftsman bungalow 3 blocks from Sunset Lanes, my first actual home since leaving my mother's house. We launched a community history museum in the bowling alleys and used office space, displaying photographs and artifacts from Greenfield's past. With the business stable, I established the Bill Thompson Memorial Scholarship for local high school graduates pursuing business or historical preservation studies. Each year, the scholarship helped one kid who, like me, had big dreams but limited resources. Mom thrived in her role as office manager, developing systems I'd never have thought of. Little Travis became the unofficial mascot of Sunset Lanes, charming customers and learning to bowl with a special ramp we installed for children. I published an ebook guide to restoring historic bowling alleys, sharing everything I'd learned through our journey. It became a niche bestseller among preservation enthusiasts and small-town entrepreneurs looking to revitalize their own community landmarks. 3 years into our successful revival, a familiar BMW pulled into the parking lot. David looked different. The designer clothes replaced by off-the-rack basics. The confident swagger diminished. His real estate ventures had collapsed, leaving him nearly bankrupt. "I need work," he admitted, visibly struggling with the humiliation of asking for help from the stepson he'd once thrown out. The old me might have savored this reversal. The new me remembered Dad's philosophy. Success isn't about getting even. It's about getting better. I offered David a job managing parking for our increasingly busy lot, especially during weekend tournaments. Not glamorous work, but steady income with dignity attached. Over time, he earned respectable status among our staff, eventually acknowledging that what we built had value beyond just dollars. On our 5th anniversary, we hosted a grand bowling tournament and charity auction that drew participants from 3 states. Everyone who'd been part of our journey was there. Mrs. Jenkins, the economics teacher, Mrs. Parker from the bank, the old-timers who'd share memories, Zach, who'd volunteered after school and was now our assistant manager. As twilight fell and the neon Sunset Lane sign glowed against the darkening sky, I knelt beside the lane where Emma's grandfather had proposed to her grandmother decades earlier. The entire bowling alley fell silent as I asked her to marry me. Her tearful yes was drowned out by spontaneous applause. Later that night, as the celebration continued, I found myself in the back office, sorting through some old files. In a dusty box marked Williams Senior Papers, I discovered my grandfather's original business plan for Sunset Lanes from 1973, followed by my father's updated plans from the 90s. Their handwriting was different. Grandpa's precise and formal, Dad's looser and more expressive, but their vision was remarkably similar to what we'd ultimately created. A place that honored tradition while remaining relevant. A business that measured success not just in profit margins, but in community impact. I added my own business plan to the box. 3 generations of Thompson men who understood that bowling wasn't just about knocking down pins. It was about creating a space where memories could be made and preserved. Emma found me there, lost in thought among the family papers. "Everyone's looking for you," she said. "The toast is about to start." "Just connecting some dots," I replied, showing her the 3 business plans. She smiled, taking my hand and leading me back to the celebration. "The best inheritance isn't what we receive," she said. "It's what we choose to continue." As we returned to the crowd, to the gleaming lanes and the people who become family, I knew we'd done exactly what Dad would have wanted. We hadn't just saved a bowling alley. We preserved a piece of our community's soul, creating something that would outlast all of us. Sometimes the most meaningful achievements aren't building something new, but saving something valuable from being lost. That turned out to be my legacy, and Dad's too.